Hey Goobers, and welcome back to class. Today we are going to be learning about surface area. And before we start, there are a couple reminders that we need to go over. For example, what surface area is. I know in 6th grade you should have touched on it some. Surface area is when you add up the area of all the sides of a shape. So when you add up the area of all sides on the shape. So when you do that, you have to find the area of each side of the shape. Now all the sides aren't going to be exactly the same, and we're going to go over some examples like that. So when you find the area, you have to remember the area formula for both triangles and rectangles, because all shapes can be decomposed into triangles and rectangles for the most part. So if we remember correctly, the area for a rectangle can be found by multiplying base and height. So that looks like A equals base times height, or BH. Now for a triangle, there are two different formulas that mean exactly the same thing, but just look a little differently. So the one I remember, and most people do, is A equals 1/2 base times height. Now this can also be written as A equals base times height all over 2. And this is because multiplying by a fraction is the same thing as dividing by its reciprocal. And in this case, 1/2's reciprocal is 2. So when you multiply by 1/2, you're actually just dividing by 2. So that's just our easy reminder. So let's get on to today's lesson. We're going to be learning about how to find the surface area of a rectangular prism today. So we're going to start off super simple and super easy with just this rectangular prism. Now the way I like to do it is I like to take all the faces of the shape and draw them out to the side, just like what we have right here. So we can see that this shape here is the face on two sides of this rectangular prism. It is the front face and the back face. So when we find the area for that shape, we're going to have to multiply it by 2, because there are two faces that look just like that one. And the same thing with the rest of them. This shape is found here and here. This is the top and bottom faces of the rectangular prism. So when we find the area of those faces, we have to multiply that by 2 as well. And I'm adding the 2's in there just as a reminder of how many faces there are that look just like that one. In this shape here, this is the left and right sides or faces of the rectangular prism. So it is this one here and this one here. And again, there are 2. And what you may notice is that these blocks on the side don't have measurements. So we need to go ahead and add them. So as I mentioned previously, this first box, this large one, is the front and back faces. And if we notice, the front and back faces has a base of 5 and a height of 3. So we're going to go over here and write 5 and 3 on the sides to tell us how long those are. So this is a rectangle, so we're going to use our area equals base times height formula. And we're just going to do the simple math of replacing the b for base with the number we have, which is 5, and the h for height with the number we have, which is 3. And when we solve that, we get 15 units squared. And now, like I mentioned before, there are 2 faces just like this one. So we're going to have to take this 15 and we're going to have to multiply it by 2. And we're going to end up with 30 units squared. So this way, instead of adding 15 plus 15 when we add up all the faces, we're just going to go ahead and combine that face into one and just multiply it by 2 by doing that. So our next shape is going to be this middle one. So again, this is the top and bottom to our rectangular prism. And again, this one doesn't have the units for in out, so we have to look to the screen, or to our example. And we're going to look at this bottom of the shape here. We can see that it is 5 units by 2 units. So we're going to go ahead and write that out, that the bottom is 5 units and the side is 2 units. So again, this is a rectangle, so we're going to go ahead and multiply base times height, which is A equals 5 times 2. And when we multiply that out, we're going to get 10 units squared. And again, like I said before, there are 2 of these faces. So we're going to multiply that by 2, and we're going to get 20 units squared. So now we have our last and final face of this rectangular prism. And as we can see, the units for this is 2 and 3, where the base is 2 and the height is 3. And it is again a rectangle, so we're going to use A equals base times height as our area formula. We're going to do A times our units 2 and 3. And when we multiply those together, we're going to get 6 units squared. There are 2 faces just like that, so we're going to multiply by 2. And we will get 12 units squared. So now with surface area, as I mentioned on the previous page, we're going to add up all the sides. So our surface area is going to be 30 units squared, because that is our 2 front and back faces. Then we are going to add 20, because that is our front and bottom faces. And then we are going to add 12, because that is our left and right faces. And when we go ahead and add those together, we're going to get 62 units squared as our final answer. And I do hope that y'all are following along at home with a separate piece of paper so that y'all can refer back to these in your notes when you do them at home. So now when we move on to this next example, we see that not only are we working with fractions now, but also our images on the side already have the units laid out for us. So just like before, we want to go through and label how many sides there are that match this exact unit measurements. So we see that this first one is 60 by 4.5 units, and we can find those here and here on the rectangular prism. So we can see that this front face is the first one we are going to be working with, and that face has a face exactly parallel to it, which is the back one, that has the exact same measurements. So there are 2 of these faces that are exactly just like this one. When we move to the next one, there is 6 units by 2 units, which we can find here and here on our rectangular prism. So we can tell that this face, the bottom face, is the one we're talking about, and that has an exact replica parallel to it, meaning that those 2 faces are what we're going to be working with. So there are 2 faces exactly like this one. And we're going to do the same thing. We notice that this is 4.5 units by 2 units. Here's the 4.5 and here's the 2. And we can tell that that is this shape here. And that face has a face directly parallel to it that is the exact same replica, meaning that there are 2 faces, just like this one, that are going to have the exact same measurements and area. So this is a rectangle, so we are going to use the area formula for a rectangle, meaning area equals base times height. The base is 6 units, and the height is 4.5 units. So go ahead and pause this video and do the math for this. The answer you should get is 27 units squared. So we're going to move on to the next one. This is also a rectangle. This is area equals base times height. Area is going to equal, we have 6 units and 2 units. So when we multiply those, we should get 2 units squared. Or when we multiply those, we're going to get 12 units squared. And then our last one's also a rectangle, which is area equals base times height, meaning area equals 4.5 units times 2, which is going to give us, when we multiply it out, 9 units squared. And just like I said before, there are 2 of each of these shapes that have the exact same area, so we're going to go ahead and multiply them out. So 27 times 2 is going to give us 54 units squared. And 12 units squared times 2 is going to give us 24 units squared. And 9 units squared times 2 is going to give us 18 units squared. So now we have to find the surface area, which is all the areas of the faces added together. So we found that the 2 area faces of this first block is 54 units squared. We're going to add that to the second face, which is 24 units squared. And add that to that last one, which is 18 units squared. And when we add those up together, after adding them up, we should get 96 units squared. And that is the surface area of our entire rectangular prism. So this next one we're going to work on, I want to challenge y'all to try it a bit yourself. Again, we have all our units laid out, and we have all of them labeled. I want y'all to try to do this one yourself. All of our blocks have already been labeled for us with the corresponding units. And this might look like a cube, but it is not, as we can see that each face is actually a rectangle because not all the faces have the same size. And don't forget to make sure you know how many faces are going to have the same areas because their units are going to be the exact same. So go ahead and pause the video now to give yourself some time to figure it out. And when you are done in using your own pencil and paper solving this, you can hit play and check your work. So I'm assuming you hit play because you are ready to check your work. So we're going to try this first one and be sure to follow along. We see that this first block is 5.5 units by 5 units. That is going to be the front and back shape here and here. And so there are 2 that are just like this one. And again, we're going to put 2 right in there. We have 4.5 units by 5 units, which is this side one here. So it is the left and right side faces, and there are 2. And 4.5 and 5.5 units, which are the top and bottom faces, and there are 2 of those as well. So again, we're going to use our area formula, base times height, to get A equals 5.5 times 5. And when we do that, you should get 27.5 units squared. And there are 2 that are just like that one. So we're going to multiply that by 2 and get 55 units squared. This next one is, again, a rectangle. So area equals base times height. Area equals 4.5 times 5, which when you did that should have gotten 22.5 units squared. And again, there are 2. So we're going to multiply that by 2. And we're going to get 45 units squared. And again, this last one, area equals base times height. Area equals 4.5 times 5.5. And when we go ahead and multiply those, we get 24.75 units squared. And now we're going to find the surface area. We should get 55 plus 45 plus 24.75. And we're going to add them up to give us 124.75. Now, if that is not the answer you got, and please do remember to add units squared. If that's not the answer you got, that is perfectly fine. Go through this, double check your work, and I highly recommend trying again and maybe even give yourself some practice. You can always go online, find some more practice problems to do. You can always go to iExcel, things like that, to find more practice problems and help yourself improve, because math only gets better with time. And if you made a mistake, that is perfectly fine, because science says you learn the most from your mistakes. So join us next time when we learn how to do triangular prisms and finding the surface area of those, which is just like rectangular prisms, but this time we're going to be working with some triangles. So I will see you then.